Hey gang, Aldo J here. Wanted to thank my cousin Jessica in Wilkes-Barre, PA. Hey gang, Aldo J here. Happy Saturday. It's starting to slowly warm up here in the East Coast. We're looking like spring's around the corner. We hope that's the case. I hope you're making a good Saturday wherever you are. This is something I wanted to do for quite some time, and I'd like to get into it in detail at some point. But I know I've done some videos before where I talked about my childhood bands and favorites and questions that I've answered about how I got into music and all these things, right? But for me, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about some of the bands and where my mind was as a teenager. So before playlists, before streaming, before everything sounded the same, this is the music that raised me. So I felt that rock was always dangerous, right? It was weird. It was alive. You had FM radio. You had albums. They mattered the most, right? Who had the nicest album, the most latest album? Um, and albums mattered way more than singles did in the 1970s, right? Bands weren't brands yet, right? They were just identities coming out of the closet. Uh, and again, those visuals that you could picture, like when I go back to a teenage memory, you had those album covers, you had old radio dials, you had cassette boxes, boom boxes, black and white band photos. These were the things that were the era of the rock music that started to evolve, right? Blue Oyster Cult, they're the mysterious one, right? The dark, the sci-fi, the hard rock that stood apart from everything else. Their songs, they felt like short stories, not just hooks, but a short story that actually told you something. It wasn't just a very good poem that rhymed well. And that was perfect for late night listening as a teenager back in the day. And I like that. Blue Oyster Cult made rock feel dangerous and smart, right? And what can you visualize that with? Cosmic imagery, right? Fogs, lasers, dark stage lighting, uh, symbol graphics without lyrics, right? Then you had, and I've never mentioned this before as far as guitar players. I know I mentioned before Eddie Van Halen and Buck Dharma. I mean, and look, there's a host of others, but the ones that I used to gravitate a lot to, um, Aerosmith. I don't think I've ever mentioned to you the love I had growing up, and I still do, from Aerosmith, right? A band from Boston, a band that went and took blues and added a really cool rock feel to it and took some classic songs that we all know, like Train Kept a Rollin' and Mother Popcorn and all these other songs that Rattlesnake Shake. And they put a rock flavor, a twist into it, right? Raw American rock energy. And we could see why they're known as the Bad Boys from Boston, right? The best American rock band of all time, right? Their music had attitude, it had groove. You really have to sit down, and we have all these technologies now. Today, I'm sorry, years ago, when I wanted to know some of the lyrics that maybe they were said in a way where I didn't hear them, or you had to buy a songbook, right? And, if you were the type of person that just liked a given song, you bought the songbook anyway because you were cool. That's what you wanted to do. But you wanted to understand the lyrics, right? Now, Steven Tyler wrote about a lot of dark things, right? But a lot of positive things too. In the early days, it was a lot about dark because of the struggles with touring. People think that being a rock star is so glamorous, or even a musician, a traveling musician. It's not. When you get on the stage and you have the lights hitting you and you see the fans cheering, sure, that's a really cool thing, and it energizes you and it makes your personal original songs that much. You get much more of a vibe to want to deliver them in that manner, because you're not just playing them in the basement of your house, or in the bedroom jamming, or with the neighbors yelling at you. Now you've got hundreds or maybe thousands of people uh, loving what you're doing, and they're cheering you on, and they came to support you. So it's a total different feeling, right? But as a teenager, you're just listening to this stuff and you're trying to understand it. But now, flash forward, the lyrics mean even more to you. You're more mature, you're older. You understand. Steven Tyler, and even in his 20s, was talking about some really heavy stuff, right? And it's amazing that someone at that age could have been so articulate and descriptive of the things he was going through. And how did he even do that through all the challenges of being out of it on drugs? And I don't mean to say that in a bad way. I'm not making fun of anybody that's on drugs or has a substance abuse problem, whether it be alcohol, drug, whatever. But Steven Tyler, man, everybody says it, and you may have heard this before, like, how is he even still alive after what he went through? How can he even walk around the way he does, even pushing 77 years old? I think in a couple of weeks, he's going to be 78, March 26th, 1948. But, it's those things. I was really into that messy, human, and emotional, those types of car songs that you had to put on in the car, right? It was a car ride, to me, they weren't perfect, but they worked. They were awesome, right? So what do you visualize when you see Aerosmith? You see these street tough guys, right? Street footage, vintage performance clips, black leather, all of these things, right? And you see this charismatic leader of what Steven Tyler was, right? Look at Phil Collins. Where was Phil Collins before? In the back. He was in the back. He was the drummer. And what happened? Was he good as a drummer? Phenomenal. But he had that personality to move up to the front and to lead a band and to, direct an entire concert and have people be on their feet. Steven Tyler was a drummer in Chain Reaction. The Sun. Great stuff. Listen to it. Go on YouTube and look up Chain Reaction and put Steven Tyler so that you get the right information. And you'll hear his voice. But while you're listening to that, he's playing the drums, right? He's doing a Don Henley, right? But Don Henley pretty much remained in the back for the most part. Yeah, he had a solo album and he sang, but Phil Collins got up and made that leap from back to front. Steven Tyler made that leap from back to front, and he was meant for it. If you've ever been to an Aerosmith concert and you see how Steven Tyler controls the stage, controls the emotion, it's amazing. Now, I saw Steven Tyler first row in 1985 with my cousin Scott Allegrini with me. My brother Steve and Adam Allegrini were maybe like 11 rows behind us, which was still a great show, right there on the floor at the Philadelphia Spectrum. And Steven Tyler and the guys were not really on their game at the point. They just weren't. They were struggling. Their albums that they just put out, I believe it was... not Let the Music Do the Talking. Why don't I know? Done with Mirrors. Thank you. Outstanding. A lot of people think it's a really good album and they can't believe that they wrote it in the state of where they were. They had just gotten back together again after several years of their rhythm guitarist and Brad Whitford and Joe Perry leaving and going off and doing their separate things. But, I've always loved that energy. And I still remember the show at the Spectrum where Tyler threw a Budweiser. He came out in the middle of a song and he took a sip from the Bud and tossed it, and it went over my head and the driplets of the beer just landed on my shoulder. And I don't know, some girl a couple rows behind me got it and started swigging it. I still remember that, right? But the energy, even though he was still not in his full performance that you would expect to see, was still good. He still was able to command the stage. But now when you look and you see some modern stuff, you look at even it's 2026, go back even 10 years and you'll see any concert that you want to pull up on YouTube, you'll see how Steven Tyler is able to gravitate the audience towards him like a magnet, right? And that's what was cool. I always liked it. I would sit in my room at night and listen to some of these lyrics. Some of them I didn't even understand, and then it took me a while, as I said, as I got older, to really put together what he was trying to say. But I liked the groove. And what did I listen to a lot? Oh gosh, I mean, the first record, Aerosmith, the debut in 1973. I love that. I used to listen to it back and forth. Um, Get Your Wings, great album. I used to listen to it back and forth. You asked my brother and sister. I knew the lyrics front to back and back to front. Toys in the Attic. You just think, wow, look at this. What does that mean? You see, an album cover with Steven Tyler on the back with the band sitting there, and then in the front there's all these toys. But you don't realize he's talking about drug abuse. Those were the toys that he had that were in the attic that he used to abuse. Then you go to Rocks, right? When many people say that that's their critically acclaimed album for so many reasons. The way, the delivery of it, just the performance, just the rawness of it. Oh God, it's just phenomenal. And then people said then they started to go down with like Draw the Line, and I still like a lot of songs on Draw the Line. But don't like again, I know I know all these songs, loved them. Night in the Ruts, great album, great album. Even when they were starting to fall apart, by the time they did Rock in a Hard Place, Steven Tyler was beyond gone. They all were gone at that point. I mean, really even worse. But they took out some classic songs. They did some original songs in there. And I mean, they still had the groove. It wasn't the attention grabbing groove, but if you were an Aerosmith fan, it was an album that you liked. Boom. Then you fast forward, they did Done with Mirrors and so forth. Then you see the transition where they went from, hey, now we're doing this Permanent Vacation album and we're doing this poppy thing. Dude looks like a lady. And you see the video, right? The video is funny. You see the bride at turn around and it's a dude with a beard, right? Was that Desmond Child? I forgot, but you see the humor in it. And a lot of people didn't like that. Hard rockers, that were used to Aerosmith early in the beginning, like me, were probably like, oh my God, what's this? Good music thinking, right? And strategic thinking, right? You had the promoters telling them, look, you guys can really be good. You can grab a new audience by being versatile and coming up with a pop song with horns in the background, and make it be like, you're trying to invent a whole new fan base. And they did. Permanent Vacation was an awesome record, right? You had Ragdoll, you had Dude Looks Like a Lady. And I personally liked St. John, that bass, Tom Hamilton coming in there. Oh, goosebumps. But again, a lot of people don't like that. They don't like that they started going into the ballads and, I don't want to miss a thing. And, oh my God, that's not Aerosmith. But fans, it is Aerosmith. It's Aerosmith showing that they can be versatile and that they could take this hard rock image that they had and reinvent themselves in another light, right? People thought like the Walk This Way with Run DMC, like, oh my God, that rapping version. Now, personally, I like the original version way better. I do. But you could see that Steven Tyler attracted the attention. The whole band attracted the attention of Run DMC. And that it's an honorable thing to want to do, cover somebody's covering your songs. You're like, whoa, that's great, right? And they embraced it, and look what happened. It became a hit to newer people. Now you're bringing in people that are into like R&B and soul and other areas, and they're like, wait a minute, I like Aerosmith, right? And I have a lot of buddies of mine that I love to death, like brothers, right? They're into R&B, soul, disco, and all this stuff. As soon as they heard Joe Perry's guitar solos and all, they're like, whoa, who is this guy? It's like, he's been around a while, but it's a different genre. But you see how they reinvented themselves. And again, so I never really brought up my love for Aerosmith, my love for Joe Perry's awesome solos. And you know what? I want to bring up Brad Whitford. Brad Whitford, he's always the guy behind the scenes. But, you think of songs like Last Child and You hear him play the lead too, and I think Coney Island Whitefish Boy. There's so much about Brad Whitford that Voodoo Medicine Man. That's Brad Whitford. He's awesome. So check out Aerosmith if you're into rock, or maybe you're a younger crowd now that maybe you've heard Dream On and some of the other songs, and you go, "Wow, I didn't know that was an older band." Check out some of these songs, right? Voodoo Medicine Man. God, I love Saint John. Saint John is great from Permanent Vacation. If you're into like the groovy stuff, Sight for Sore Eyes, I can go on and on forever. So Aerosmith, one of my favorite bands of all time. Wow. Now we're going to jump to Van Halen. What it was like to grow up in the 70s. They were the shockwave, folks. Not only high energy, but we all know that Eddie Van Halen changed the way guitar was played in the rock genre, right? He always admitted that he never invented the tapping. I mean, Paganini used to do it on the violin, and others played guitar and did it too, as you may well know, especially if you're a guitarist and all. But Eddie Van Halen flashed it. He made it a totally unique thing, right? And he did it with such flawlessness. Like, hey, I'm in a coma, but I could still jam, right? It was flashy. It was joyfully chaotic, and sometimes it was the moment really that rock became athletic, right? Now you're doing more than just playing a power chord, right? You're doing more than just bending a few strings. You're going off and doing all this stuff, and you're putting in these melodic and very energetic guitar solos, right? And we can name them all. And I mean, even Eruption, of course, is his signature. Thank you, Ted Templeman, for agreeing to put that on the original album, right? It showcased Eddie's talent and his versatility and his originality to come up with something like that. And I'm sure Michael Jackson heard it when he said, why don't you recruit this guy? I want him on my record. Great move, Michael, right? Beat It went on to like make you huge bucks, right? But just remember this, though. I mean, Van Halen did not ask for permission. They just kicked the door down, right? Gene Simmons noticed them in the club days. He offered to foot a demo for them. Just a phenomenal band all around. And then to find out that my grandmother just comes out of the woodwork and says, "Oh, by the way, do you know that Valerie Bertinelli, her grandmother and aunt from Delaware, Claymont, Delaware, are coming over this weekend? You're related to them." And I'm like, "Gee, thanks a lot. Thanks for the culture shock. When were you going to tell me this?" My whole grandmother's like stoned, not even telling me something critical like that. But all right, let's get to the visuals of Van Halen, right? There's guitar close-up solos of watching Eddie's fingers and just going, "I'm never playing guitar anymore again. I quit." Right? Those fast cuts to you're sitting there and now all of a sudden he's swinging across the Spectrum stage and Panama's being played, and then he slides right in and does the guitar solo, right? It's just that neon 80s style motion graphics that attract you, and just the way Eddie Van Halen's signature grin. He always enjoyed what he did. You always knew, even if he was in pain or having a personal matter, or who knows what was on his mind that day, it came across as, "I'm having the best fun and thank you for being here with me." That's the charismatic draw that makes people like a band, right? You could see a band and listen to them rather on tape or whatever it is, and go, "That's great," and then see them live and it's like you're like, "Okay, yeah, okay," because they're just there and they're not. But not with Van Halen. You had to have eyes all over your head looking at where they're going. Like, where's David Lee Roth now? Where's Sammy? Now Sammy Hagar is falling down from the top of the ceiling, or he's up on the rafters hanging over. This was the energetic music that nobody, even in the big band era, right? The big band era with Buddy Rich and all. They had some flashy dancers, and which I loved. Again, I was brought up in a lot of very different genres due to having a dad that was a classical virtuoso and graduate of Curtis Institute. But as good as some of these dancers were, and harmony vocals, that, and I'm just going to rattle things off: the Andrews sisters, the King sisters, um, and all these different dancers, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and all, just to see how energetic to see the rock bands perform is just phenomenal. So we're going to bring it home. What did these bands give me? Wow. As a rock star would say, and I'm not a rock star, I'm an unknown indie artist, but a rock star would say that getting out there in front of the audience, and you have so much confidence when you see that the audience is into what you're doing, right? And again, if you're just sitting there, you're going to promote that mood to people. That mood is going to be evident to everyone, and they're just going to not be into it. But these bands, classic rock, Aerosmith, Blue Oyster Cult, again, I don't want to say that I didn't listen to other things. I loved all music of that time. I was a very big Led Zeppelin fan too, and I was into Southern rock. I listened to all, 38 Special and Leonard Skinner. Then I got into like some of the harder stuff. I saw many metal bands, but what these bands gave me was that confidence and the individuality of being able to go out and expressing yourself in your own musical way, right? You're doing it. This is you doing it. You're out there performing, and you're not being Jimmy Page. You're being your own Jimmy Page or your own Buck Dharma in a way. But you appreciate these guys, right? See, the taste that you got back from these bands in the 70s, 80s, and all, it wasn't algorithm fed. It was here. Music was an identity. It wasn't just background noise, right? To me, it wasn't just music. It was formation. And for Hygh Risque to be a part of this as we started to form in the early 90s, we still had our love for the 80s and 70s music, and even the 60s, right? Ernie was a really big, is a Beatles fan, very huge Beatles. I was a huge Beatles fan, probably not as big as Ernie, but my dad, my dad listened to everything, and I didn't know much about him because, I was 9 years old when he passed away, and my mom would tell me stories, and my Uncle Bob, that he's like, your father loved Paul McCartney, and he thought, this is a classical guy that went to school and was a master at what he did. Right? He was not only a music teacher, but he mastered the clarinet and saxophone. Bottom line. And for him, a lot of classical artists, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but a lot of classical artists, musicians, teachers, they all think like, that's it, classical, and nothing else. Everything else is horrible, right? My dad wasn't like that. And what I liked about that, that's where music appreciation can really benefit somebody. If you're so hard nosed, nothing's better than this, nothing's better than that. Well, just think of this. If you didn't have Chopin, and you didn't have Beethoven, and you didn't have Schubert or Verdi or Paganini or any of these other guys, you wouldn't have had things branch from them. You wouldn't have had jazz form from them. Nothing would have happened, right? You just wouldn't have had something burst on the scene, right? Classical music, really, if you listen to Yngwie Malmsteen and all these, neoclassical guitarists and all, they made it rock modernized, if you will, in a flashy way. Love Yngwie, he's phenomenal. And I got to see him at the Chestnut Cabaret in Philadelphia. Boy, am I really going off track, but great artist, great ingenuity, and what else can you say he was? He was very original in his own way. So what I want to know now from you below, please let me know what band raised you. Drop the comments, please. Let me know, right? And don't say Spotify told you, right? Name the first album that you loved. What was the very best song that you liked, whether you listened it on the radio or your friends made you hear it through a streaming platform, right? I'm going all backgrounds, whether we grew up on 8-track tape or CDs, whatever. I want you to tell me, what is your favorite song? What is your favorite band? What is your favorite lyric? What is the favorite concert you went to? Whatever that may be. I want to hear from you. And by the way, real quickly, I just got some wonderful feedback each and every day from people all over the world. I got one yesterday from the Philippines on our Hearts Collide video post there, a wonderful comment. I'm speechless. I really am. And to be honest with you, I'm a very sentimental guy. And it brings a tear to my eyes. It chokes me up to see that so many people from all over the world are liking our songs. And again, we're nobodies. We're just everyday guys that have the everyday jobs, right? Like, we're the news reporters at the Daily Planet. We have a day job. And we're not out there touring with, some of the biggest bands in the world. We're just a local band from South Jersey. And we loved having the fun, and we're trying to do things more. We're all doing separate writing things on our own and more originality. Stay tuned. We'll keep you posted on that. I know it sounds longer than usual, but we have life in the way too, like all of us. But let us know, and feel free at any time. And I apologize if I have not gotten back to you. It's not an oversight. It's not something intentional, and I hope I haven't. But thank you very much for listening to this segment. Again, let me know your thoughts. Please subscribe below. Tell others about Hygh Risque. And it's Hygh Risque. It's like bisque soup, lobster bisque. A lot of people think it's Hygh Risque. It's not. But thank you very much. You guys are the best. And from Aldo J here, keep on rocking. Thank you for keeping rock music alive, and enjoy the weekend. Double thumbs up.